Glad it's not as cold as it's been the last week. It's warmed up a tiny bit.
Yes.
Okay, well, it looks like we have a great group tonight. A nice group. Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shalom. Frank, I'm going to mute everyone before you start.
Great.
Frank, you're also muted.
How's that? Can you hear me? Great. Okay, page 3 and music.
Oh, I forgot to pull up the service booklet. 1 minute, folks. Sorry.
Rebecca, what song was the first one? Buen Shabbat?
We're going to start with Buen Shabbat. Yes.
Okay, that's song number 5.
Great. Buen Shabbat, con salud y vida. Buen Shabbat, a toda la familia. Buen Shabbat, con salud y vida. Adiós muchos, con paz y alegría.
Thank you. Okay. So we will continue with our welcome, which is on page 3. Does everybody have the booklet? Would somebody like
Nobody
to?
has the booklet. Kathy has to put it on the
Yes,
screen.
okay. I mean, is it on yet so everyone could see it?
Yes, it's up.
Cool. So would somebody like to unmute themselves and read the welcome number 1 on page 3?
Sure, I will.
Good, thank you.
The past, present, and future are timelessly linked in the spinning circle of life. Our past was the seed that became the present. We can make it bloom in the future if we nurture it with love, respect, and understanding of the shared culture and heritage that we call life.
Thank you. So we will continue with our candle lighting on page 5. Very nice picture. And we renew ourselves for the week ahead, everyone, so that we will have strength for ourselves, our families, and our part in making the world a better place. We kindle the lights of Shabbat as symbols of human enlightenment and human compassion to celebrate our coming together, to illuminate our lives and the warmth we find in our community. We remember the generation before us who lit candles as we do and found beauty and serenity in their light. So let's say together, Na'eh ha'or ba'olam, Na'eh ha'or ba'adam, Na'eh ha'or ba'shabbat, Nokir or HaShabbat. How wonderful is the light in the world. How wonderful is the light within humanity. How wonderful is the light of Shabbat, and we cherish the light of Shabbat.
נאה האור בעולם, נאה האור באדם, נאה האור בשבת, נוקיר את אור השבת. איפה אורי, אורי בי, איפה תקוותי, תקוותי בי, איפה כוחי, כוחי בי, וגם בך, וגם בך, איפה כוחי, כוחי בי, וגם בך, וגם בך. There is my light is in me. There is my hope is in me. There is my strength is in me. And in you, and in you. There is my strength is in me. And in you, and in you.
Thank you. We will continue on page 8, the values of secular Judaism. And Julia, would you like to unmute and lead us in that reading on page 8? Okay. Okay. On Shabbat, we celebrate and reaffirm our Jewish identity. A Jew is someone who identifies with the history, culture, and future of the Jewish people. We make connections to our past through our ancestors and to our future by leading meaningful lives. We believe that Jewish identity is best preserved in a free, pluralistic environment that honors all cultures. We believe in the nobility of human fellowship and in the joy of unity. The freedom and dignity of the Jewish people must go hand in hand with the freedom and dignity of every human being. Human beings possess the power and responsibility to shape their own lives independent of supernatural authority. Jewish history is a human saga, a testament to the significance of human power and human responsibility. We believe in the gift of human reason and the strength of human potential to shape our own lives. And we will continue on page 10 with another song.
This one is going to be Hine Matov, so I'll give a moment just in case we want to get to.
Rebecca, do you know what page it's on?
I think it's on 30.
Okay.
No, 50. Sorry, number 13 on page 50. Yeah. Great. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שפט אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שפט אחים
So on continuing on page 10, I guess it's our time to hear from all of us. So do we have joys, concerns, and sorrows? I think Kathy will help me out with that. So if anyone has anything to say, or we can, Kathy can unmute you and we can hear from everybody.
Okay, so please raise your hand if you have anything, or you can use the raise hand button if you have anything you wish to say. Susan?
So I'm very happy about this, actually. I've been invited at the end of this month to go to Kinsale, Ireland, which is in the south of Ireland near Cork, to participate in a brand new Beatles fan festival. And I'm going to be going for 5 days to help them out, moderating panels, acting as an MC and doing other things for them. And gonna get to see some old friends and get to make some new friends, and I'm very excited about it. And I've never been to Ireland. I've seen the Dublin airport. So I'm gonna get to see more than the Dublin airport, which is kind of fun. And I'm gonna have a 2.5-hour train ride from the Dublin airport. But I'm very excited about it, and that's just something that's coming up at the end of this month. So I'm kind of stoked, you know?
So Susan, if you have a very big trunk, you can take me with you. I wouldn't mind that.
You know, they might charge me extra for the overweight luggage. I don't know, you know.
Well, I'm not skinny, so I
No,
get.
it's not even you. It's the trunk.
Oh, the trunk. Yeah. We'll have a great trip. Anyone else? Okay.
Samantha?
Hi, everybody. I put in for a paper to present at the American Musicological Society last November, but I couldn't go. And my husband hasn't been working for a long time, and it's been really hard, so I couldn't afford to go. The paper was accepted. Anyway, so that was a real disappointment because they refused to allow me to present virtually. And the paper was, I work on music and disability, so that was a real problem because that meant that the conference was really inaccessible. Anyway, I got an email this week, and the conference panel is going to be turned into a publication and not a international journal. And they invited me to submit what I would have published, what I would have presented, but it's going to be published. So I was really excited to be able to publish my work, even though I wanted to present it and I couldn't, but I get to publish it, and that's almost better. So
Mazel.
Yes. Great.
Anna? You have to unmute.
Yes, so Shabbat Shalom, and I had very good news this week. I'm diabetic, and so it had started to affect my vision a little, and I thought I was going to have needles in my eye, but I've been taking, for years, I've been taking very good care of myself. I'm very careful about what I eat, and I am winning the battle. My glucose is very low. I don't need needles anymore, or I'm not going to have needles. My vision is fine. Whatever was there went away. So the doctor was very proud of me, and I'm very proud of myself too.
Yeah. And we're proud of you too, Anna. Yes.
And I see that Carol put in the chat that she had her hip replacement surgery on
Yes.
Monday. So get well soon, hopefully.
Anna, that's amazing. Congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, I really do watch myself. It's just something I learned how to do. It's, you know, over some years, I just completely changed my eating habits and everything, and it's just second nature to me now. So, yeah, that's really good because diabetes is not a joke.
I see that Ellen has her hand up. Ellen, you have to unmute.
Still muted.
Hi, sorry. No, yeah, I couldn't get the screen doing the right thing. No, I didn't have my hand up. I don't know what happened.
No,
Maybe-
Ellen, the other Ellen.
Oh, sorry.
Ellen Wyman.
Okay.
Okay, I did it. Thanks to my daughter. No, my daughter did it. Well, congratulations, Carol, on your hip replacement on Monday, because I had a hip replacement too. And they are as amazing as people say they are. And it's pretty it's pretty amazing that you spent all these months in abject pain and then you have the replacement and you're not in pain. It's really amazing.
Wow.
I wanted to congratulate you.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Otherwise, I'm doing well and I'm zipping around my apartment and PT starts on Monday and I plan to go swimming and playing tennis really soon.
Yay.
Yay. Anyway, I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Does anyone else? Oh, I see Barry and Elaine.
Yeah, so we just want to say hi to everybody. Mary and I, we are members of Mahar. It's a good Mahar in Greater DC area.
Mm.
And thank you for invitation. And we are happy to be here. And only two people that I know here is Deb Garden, that used to be our Mahar member, and
Mhm.
Peter sometimes joins our adult ed. Yeah, so the two people that I know here. But good to see everybody.
Yes.
Welcome.
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 Thank you.
Does
Okay.
anybody else have anything they want to add? Okay, Frank, over to you.
Great. Thank you. So, Peter is going to help us continue with our adult ed. So he has a Devar Torah for us. And so take it away, Peter.
Thank you very much. Good Shabbos, everybody. Tomorrow morning's traditional reading is Vayechi. Hope I'm pronouncing it right. And it means, and he lived. This is the last section of Genesis. And we're going to start, as we get to momentum, eventually to Passover, which is all about the Exodus and Shemot. So we're starting to rev up a little bit. And if anybody hasn't joined us earlier, this is a secular Devar Torah, just to express some ideas, some thoughts that come out of the traditional reading. So as I go along, you'll see how this lays out. Now, as I said, it's called And He Lived. This is about Jacob. Some citations calls this portion appreciation. Another calls it conflict and reconciliation. Let's see. This portion this week continues with the story of Jacob, now 147 years old and about to die, and apparently unafraid to meet with his 12 sons. This is the Jacob who had a son Joseph, who was sold by his brothers and became a dream interpreter to the Pharaoh, the coat of many colors, 7 years of feasts and 7 years of famine fame. You'll recognize that, whether it's a Andrew Lloyd Webber musical or you just know it. At this point, all the brothers are reunited at Jacob's request, as he is dying, to discuss their future as he sees it. Jacob goes one by one to each son and gives them a prediction, or could it be a goal or a warning? And this is to carry forward in their life or to recognize their future. It's not so much now as he both praises and criticizes each son with their strengths and weaknesses, but what they will do with their final words of Jacob. For instance, Asher, he predicts his descendants will be happy, prosperous farmers. To Reuben, the eldest firstborn, although Jacob says he should be the go-to stand-up son, he says he's undependable. Kind of shocking. In real life, does this really happen? Can it happen, or does it happen, or not at all? In popular culture, you might recall the dinner scene in It's a Wonderful Life where George Bailey, played by Jimmy Stewart, tells his father, Peter Bailey, over dinner, "Pop, you want a shock? I think you're a great guy." George, that's Jimmy Stewart, notices the housekeeper, Annie, peeking in on the discussion and asks her if she heard it all. She says, "Yes, and it's about time one of you lugheads said it." The other lughead is the brother not in the scene. Soon in the movie off screen, Peter Bailey dies, and George, we realize at that dinner moment earlier, told his father his deep feelings before it was too late. Mostly, these indications come out dramatically in the legal reading of the will, where the deceased has the final say, read from a printed document to all family members in attendance. One would think upon the death of a relative, be it an aunt or uncle or a parent, direct blood relation, that the weight of legacy and direction can be assessed by a dry reading of who gets what and maybe why. In-person gathering, remember, no Zoom in those days, spells it out for each son on their future, their occupation, their relationship to family or community, with a pinch of Eitzah, advice. Some praises in there too. Although the will speaks for the deceased, it must be bracing, difficult, extremely hard to hear live and in front of the siblings what a father thinks each child should be or do in his dying eyes to make their mark in the world. It's not quite a pep talk, maybe rather an exit interview in reverse, and perhaps a roadmap of the next part of their lives without the old man. Therefore, we should consider or think about, do we regret not taking a minute to thank those around us in the family who are aging, declining, near death, to tell them and say face to face how they feel about that uncle, sister, parent? Yeah, it's a bit of a cliche, but as Annie points out in the film, it's about time. By saying those feelings, get it out, express it while you can. And perhaps, like Jacob, taking a minute, maybe several minutes, there's 12 sons, and he talks to them for good or betterment and firsthand how he feels about them, very directly. As one rabbi aptly calls this parsha, appreciation, it could also be about timing. Corny as it may be, timing does, in real life, mean a lot. Good Shabbos. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank
if
you,
anybody, and one last thing, if anybody wants to submit or do a reading in the future, contact me. There's lots of openings, different levels of exploration that goes along with the various stories. Again, thank you very much for your time, Frank, and everybody.
Thank you, Peter. Yasher Koach. So I'd like to continue on page 11. And this is the readings for contemplation. So the very last quote on page 11 is by Rabbi Hillel, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Not long, just a few thoughts. So in Pirkei Avot, which is translated the wisdom of the sages, Rabbi Hillel said, "Al tifrosh min ha-tzibur." Do not separate yourself from the community. We do live in a time of dislocation and disruption, when fear and distrust of those outside our own circles can make our everyday interactions difficult at best and almost impossible at worst. But as we walk and look around the streets of New York, we might see maybe 100 people in the course of one day, all of them belonging to different circles, each of us with our own mishigas, our own joys and challenges. And yet somehow we do have a sense that despite everything, this is our home and this is where we belong. The author Brené Brown defines belonging as the innate desire to be part of something larger than us. We do have this desire, this longing to be a part of something larger and something more. And when we find it, when we find a place where we feel at home, where we can be ourselves, that feels good and encouraging and liberating. In our case, I am thinking in particular of our belonging to this fantastic and unique city congregation. How lucky we are here in New York to be able to express our Jewish values, traditions, and culture in a way that so many of our people around the country and around the world can't even imagine exists as a legitimate Jewish lifestyle option. But belonging is a two-way street, and it can take work. For it to continue and deepen, we have to show up and be part of the exchange and flow. Our humanistic Jewish movement has been an act of creation, hasn't it? But because of its evolving nature, it can seem risky to come out of our comfort zones and think in different ways. But happily, we have been successful as a kehillah, which means a Jewish community, a true Jewish community. We have come through these many years as well as we have, because we have found ways to connect. We have continued to create spaces for belonging, which are central to our well-being as individuals, as families, as a Jewish community, and beyond. These days, people are hungry for ways to belong, for a place at the table, for an open door, for an outstretched hand, for an unconditional welcome. Holding open this kind of space here in our community is central to why we exist and why we are here. And as far as creativity, is there anything more worthy of our efforts than creating communities of belonging? Don't we need this where we live, where we gather together as Jews, where we can welcome non-Jews, and where we know that all of us belong? And while we are at it, it's important to acknowledge that as community members, we are human, we make mistakes, and at times we will disappoint each other. It's necessary and healthy to be able to admit our mistakes, name our disappointments, and offer constructive criticism. This can only strengthen the firm foundation that we have already built. We are in this together, and that's good. So we here at City Congregation, and I would also like to include my own Westchester congregation as well, we are all in this boat, in the same ancient boat that has carried our people through for millennia. May we always be works in progress, creating communities of belonging as we go ledor vador, from generation to generation, and from strength to strength. Ken Yehi, and may it be so, and Shabbat Shalom. Okay. So I think we will continue on with a musical selection on page 27.
Great. We're going to jump to page 53 for Peace in the Streets as our selection. There we go. Great. Oh, was it 54? Same thing.
If
you. So our families, do you have a volunteer to read the second selection on the bottom of page 27?
I'll read it.
Okay,
Oh, wait, Jim had his hand up. Never mind. Jim, you,
okay. I was thinking of Jim.
No, thank you. Our congregation seeks to expand our understanding, make space for everyone. As the Jewish community grows in its awareness that Jewish families come in varied configurations, including intercultural and interracial families, so too may our institutions grow to be open to the diversity of families today. With so much emphasis on traditional families, unmarried adults often feel sidelined in Jewish communal life. As more adults remain single, let us be clear that they are a welcome, integral part of our humanistic Jewish community.
Thank you. So now we're on page 28, and this is where we remember those of us who are having some challenges, health challenges, and any other types of challenges. So in this community where we find strength and common purpose, we now turn our minds and hearts toward those who need our love, who are ill, who are lonely, who suffer pain, or who have been wronged. So if we have some names we'd like to mention for Refuah Shlema, let's Kathy can help us out with that.
see Anna has her hand up.
Yeah, I don't have any names, but my heart goes out to those people in California that are losing everything. I mean, it's horrendous, and there's some synagogues that were destroyed. I feel, I try to think of myself in that kind of situation. I don't know how I would survive it. It's
Yes.
terrible, terrible.
Beautiful. Thank you.
I'm thinking of my friend Kara. She lost her job recently and also her cat recently, so it's a 2-in-1 whammy for her.
No
So
R.
I'm thinking of her at this time. I see Judith Shalit has her hand up.
My friend Robert has had his second cancer operation and is out of the ICU. And although his prognosis is not good, his spirit is beautiful. And my friend Elaine is in hospice, and she is doing she accepts. And that's all today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Samantha?
Yeah, I just want to affirm what Anna said. I'm on Jewbook. That's Facebook, but Jews, it's Facebook, but it's a lot of groups that are populated by Jews. And I've been hearing a lot about the synagogues that have been destroyed. But also it's like, like the Getty Museum, like I saw an article about the gardens getting burned. Like it's very upsetting. And yeah, it's just very upsetting. So, and also I just want to share that my apartment was burned down in 2014. My partner and I lost everything. So it's just bringing up a lot of feelings. But also I just want to share my mom over Hanukkah, over the holidays, came down with a DVT, a deep vein thrombosis. And she's okay. They're treating it with anticoagulants, and she didn't need to be hospitalized, but it's just a lot, it's just a lot. So thoughts from my mom.
What's her name, Samantha? What's your mom's name?
Cheryl Bassler,
Thank
like
you.
my name.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay,
Susan?
anyone else?
Susan?
Sorry, the screen went down and I couldn't find it. I'm thinking about my friend Barbara Kinlock, who had surgery 2 days ago for a cancerous spot in her mouth. I saw her today. She's better, but she's very tired and she's swollen up and cranky, and needless to say, I think that's warranted. But I'm sending her wishes for healing, and I hope that she's okay and gets a good report from the doctor when she goes back to school.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Rebecca, let's continue with a refuah shlema. Beautiful. Thank you. So we will continue on with our Kaddish, and let's go to page 30 and selection number 2. And would someone like to read that selection?
I'll read it.
Good.
Death is inevitable, but out of our grief can come understanding. Through our sorrows, we join those who have known bereavement before us and those who have yet to do so. May we live wisely, courageously, and usefully. May the lives they led give us inspiration for the lives we have yet to live. Zecher Tzadik Livracha, we cherish the memory of our loved ones.
Thank you. And at this point, any names that we'd like to mention?
Peter?
On a more popular, if I could use that word, note, last month we sang one of his most famous songs, Light One Candle, Peter Yarrow. But on a personal note, I want to recognize the art side of my grandmother, Irene Moniz, from 1999. And moreover, my uncle, my mother's brother, 90 years old, died on New Year's Eve. And in each and every way, they're to be remembered in personally and publicly in different ways, but I want to make that recognition. Thank you.
Rachel and Titus?
Hi, it's Rachel. I'm remembering the yard site of my grandfather who died in 2001.
Thank you. Sybil? You have to unmute, Sybil.
This coming Tuesday is the 9th yahrzeit of my husband, David, who many of you knew.
Thank you, Sybil. Judith?
Remembering my father on the anniversary of his birth this week.
Thank you, Judith.
Thank you.
I'm remembering my cousin who his 10th yahrzeit was on the 3rd of this month. So I'm thinking of him and his family. Does anyone else have anyone they want to mention?
Okay, so Rebecca, let's continue with Zecher Tzadik. Thank you. Great. So now we will continue with our Kiddush on page 32 with blessing for wine and then for the challah. Would somebody like to read the blessing for the wine on page 32? We need some more rabbis here. So I need some help with this. So I need somebody to
Sure.
yes, help us out.
We celebrate the fruit of the vine and nature's gifts. As we bend nature to our pleasure, we also think about our duties as caretakers of this planet. We dedicate this wine to the joy of Shabbat, to the lives of generations past and generations to come, and to the planet that sustains us. Let us say together, Na'im ha'chaim ba'olam, Na'im ha'chaim ba'anu, Na'im migadlei pri hagofen l'chaim. We celebrate the life within the world. We celebrate the life within us. We cherish those who grow and tend the fruit of the vine. L'chaim, to life.
Perfect. So we'll sing our blessing.
Na'im ha'chaim ba'olam, Na'im ha'chaim ba'anu, Na'im migadlei pri hagafen l'chaim.
L'chaim. And now we're on page 34 with our bread, our challah. So I need another victim.
I'll do it. I don't have my video on, but this is Ellen that you haven't seen before.
Okay, Ellen.
Okay. Breaking bread together is an ancient custom in many cultures. It signifies sharing, fellowship, and coming together in peace. We reenact this ritual together as a sign of our common humanity, our care for one another, and for those less fortunate than ourselves. Let us say together.
Na'e matanot hamazon, Na'e amal chapenu, Na'e lechem haaretz b'te'avon. How wonderful is the gift of food. How wonderful is the work of our hands. How wonderful is the bread of the earth. We cherish those who bring forth bread from the earth.
나의 만난 하마손 나의 아마가페누 나의 레케 마렛 베테아본.
And our concluding thoughts on page 36. Each of us is here for a temporary stay on earth. For what purpose, I don't know, but it is plain that we exist for our fellow humans. In the first place, for those upon whose smiles and welfare our happiness depends, and the next for those unknown to us personally, but to whose destinies we are bound by the tie of sympathy. 100 times a day, I remind myself that my inner and outer life depends on the labor of others, living and dead, that I must exert myself in order to give the measure as I have received, and I am still receiving. And our final musical selection.
Our final song is on page 51, which is Od Yavo. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu Ve'akolam. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu Ve'akolam. Salam Aleinu Ve'akolam. Salam, salam, salam Aleinu Ve'akolam. Salam, salam. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu Ve'akolam. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu Ve'akolam.
Thank you. So I would like to turn it over to Kathy, Susan, whoever has to do some congregational business.
Hi, so the rabbi's classes will continue each week while Rabbi Tzema is on sabbatical. Every other Wednesday is his introduction to Judaism at 7:15 p.m. Tuesdays and Thursday mornings are the reading biblical stories through humanist eyes at 10:30. Monday nights is Talmud for secular Jews, 7 p.m. Every Wednesday evening is our weekly Zoom schmooze from 8 to 10. All are welcome. You don't have to be a member. The first Sunday of every month is our online grief support group, which starts at 7 and goes till 9 o'clock. You also, again, anyone can attend. Our next Shabbat is on January 10th, and it will be given by Paul Golan on the topic of Christian nationalism.
Today is January 10th.
Oh, I'm sorry, January 24th. Whoopsies. Thanks, Susan. Okay, and now over to Rabbi Frank.
Okay, so do we usually give everyone like a 5-minute break or something so they can go?
No.
Oh, okay,
We
great.
usually go right into the program.
Okay, cool. So I have been asked to speak a little bit about something that is familiar to me, and that is my own personal background. And so I come from a mixed family, Jewish, Italian family, Italian Catholic and Italian Jewish. My grandmother was a Jew from Florence. She married an Italian Catholic. They lived on the Lower East Side in Manhattan. And when they married, of course, there was no Italian Jewish community down on the Lower East Side. Everybody was Polish or Russian. And so they lived, they lived in the Italian community and they raised their kids as Catholic, so that's part of my background. But for tonight, we have another part of my background, which is also kind of interesting, I think. And that's on my dad's side. And my father was Sicilian. He was raised as Catholic. Everybody's raised as Catholic. But many years ago, I had gone to visit my dad's hometown in Sicily. It's on the west coast, and it's called Sambuca di Sicilia. This town was originally it was founded by Arabs in the year 827. And I was asking him about, we were talking about religion, and I asked him about my family's background. And I asked him, well, is it possible that Grandpa's family was Jewish? And my uncle said, oh, yes. He said, your grandfather's family, they lived in this town, but originally they lived in another town called Bisaquino. And he said, like hundreds of years ago, that family had been driven out of that town. And so he said they were Jewish. And then when where they lived, actually in Sambuca, they intermarried because they converted. They were called Anusim, or neophytes, and they were Christians, but they kept Jewish traditions and customs. They would light candles on Friday night. They didn't eat, they avoided pork. They didn't not eat pork altogether, but they kind of avoided it. They just didn't drink too much milk, and mix it with meat, just little things like that. And so this was part of the tradition of this little town. And also the fact that they intermarried, these Anusim or Neophiti, these converted Jews, they were not trusted by the old Catholics, the old Christians. And so they would intermarry with each other. And so when I did research of my own last name and the last names of my relatives, and I did some genealogical research, and all of the people that were in, all the names that were in my family were names that were traditionally Jewish. Now, what does that mean, Jewish? So when these Neophiti, when they had to convert, they took names, and the Italian Jews were in. It was interesting because they actually had last names. Besides their Hebrew names, they had last names, and very often they would take the names of the towns where they were. Where they lived, or they would have the names of their occupations, and so and very often the names were weird sounding. They were kind of Arabic sounding, and so that's a little bit of the background of my family. So and as I read, I'm going to be reading from this from my notes here, but these notes, I will stop and explain several things about them. So I have some information that I want to share with you. And this information actually comes from, this mostly comes from this book. And it's called L'Ebraismo della Sicilia ricercato e esposta. So this means the Judaism in Sicily, researched and exposed. This book is actually a photocopy of a book that was written in 1748. If you look through it, you can see the text. It's just photocopied from this ancient book, and it was written by a man by the name of Giovanni di Giovanni. And he was a canon of the church in the city of Palermo, which was the capital, and he was also the head of the Office of the Inquisition. So this comes from 1748. I have a friend of mine who is Italian Jew, and we are in the process of translating this book into English. Hopefully we will be able to do it. It's a little bit of a challenge for me because the Italian is, it's okay. I can understand most of it, but the problem is the typeset. It has this like U.S. Constitution typeset, where the F's look like S's and the S's look like F's, and so to get through this is a little bit of a challenge. But we're really kind of interested in doing this because this work is not available in English, And so one of the reasons why I compiled this little talk from this book is for a couple of reasons, and one of them is that it's a true picture of how people view Jews, with all the prejudices that you could imagine and all of the insults that Jews had, everything. And so I like that because it's very, very authentic, so for me, it really rings true. So the important thing that we have to remember is that, and people don't actually realize this, is that southern Italy and Sicily were part of the Spanish Empire in 1492. And so when all of the Jews were expelled from Spain, they were also expelled from southern Italy and Sicily. So I'll just go into my spiel here, and then I'll stop and explain things as we go along. So the renowned Jewish historian by the name of Niccolò Buccaria writes, "The origin of Italian Jewry speaks of a past so remote that it seems almost legendary. In fact, a Sicilian legend relates that after having destroyed the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, the wicked Emperor Titus filled 3 ships with Jewish men, women, and children and abandoned them to the sea without a captain. God sent a storm that caused these 3 ships to be cast upon the shore, one in Spain, one in Genoa, and one in Sicily. And so began the relationship of the Sicilian Jews with the sea." That was his quote, and you'll see later on where that fits in. So from the beginning of the Christian era, there were Jewish communities in Syracuse, in Siracusa, Palermo, Messina, Agrigento, Trapani. Trapani was my grandmother's last name. Taormina, Marsala, and Catania. Jewish communities populated every cliff of the Sicilian coast, and they were fishermen. They were involved in the tuna industry. And they were also involved in commerce. Records attest that the Jewish merchants from Trapani sold Sicilian silk in Alexandria, and the children of these merchants studied in Palestine, North Africa, and even India. Sicilian Jews were also famous for their work with coral. Coral was not only used for the creation of household articles, but it was also carved into talismans. The red color of the coral was considered a powerful protection against the evil eye. So when you have this red, I think they call it red bendel, this red ribbon that you can tie in a car to, as a talisman against the evil eye. You guys know that, right? It's the Jewish, right? And so why red? Because red was considered a talisman from coral. And some of you who know Italians might see these they look like little horns, the Italian horns, they're red. They're supposed to be coral, and that's a protection against the evil eye. Italians, no matter if they're Christian Jews and also any Middle Eastern Jews, they're much more superstitious than Jews, than Jews from Eastern Europe. Even though the Jews from Eastern Europe, they're superstitious too, but not to the extent of the Italians. The Jews brought to Sicily the art of silk weaving, the cultivation of the palm tree and henna. They drew up nautical maps, began the first mining prospects, translated medical texts from Arabic into Latin, texts which, among other things, introduced the concept of vaccine to Europe. The occupation of blacksmithing was almost entirely Jewish, as well as carpentry. The Venetian word ghetto meant the foundry. The ghetto means the wrought iron where they would produce the iron. So when you go to Venice and you go to the ghetto, you'll see that right close by is where the Jewish ghetto was, where they were forced to live. That was the foundry. And so wrought iron work was almost exclusively Jewish, and that was what my grandfather was. He was a wrought iron worker, a mastro ferraio. And when I went to the town, his brother was still alive, and he would take me through the town, and he said, "Your grandfather made the doors of this church, and they made the gates on the cemetery, and all that." So, when he came here, he was also involved in craftsmanship as well. So according to this Giovanni, who wrote this book, Jews comprised 10% of the Sicilian population in the 15th century of about 1 million, including Arabic Jews. So where did the Jews come from? They came from a couple of different places. They came from Greece. They were part of the Byzantine Empire, so they actually were on the east coast. Sicily is like a triangle, and if you can divide it in half, the eastern part of Sicily was Greek, the western part of Sicily was Arabic. And so the Greek Jews came and they lived in the eastern part of Sicily, and then in the western part, which is the part where my family was from, they were of Arabic origin. And whenever you had an Arabic community, you had a Jewish community there as well. And the Jews were finally when the Christians started to take over. To go into Sicilian history is really complicated, so I'm trying to make it really easy. But the idea that the Sicilian Arabs and the Sicilian Jews were working with the Sicilian Christians, and they would translate. The Jews would be the translators of anything from Arabic into Latin. They were involved in the medical profession as well. The Sicilian Jews spoke three different languages. They spoke Ladino if they came from Spain, because there were Jews that actually came over from Spain and they lived in Italy. They spoke Greek, and they also spoke a Judeo-Arabic, right? And this language, this Judeo-Arabic, or the Sicilian Arabic, actually still exists, and it is the Maltese language. So the Maltese language, it's an Arabic language, but it came basically from the island of Sicily as well. The Spanish and native Sicilian Jewish communities did have their infighting. The Sicilian Jews accused the Spanish Jews of not being devout enough and would secretly go to Spain so they could eat pork and transgress Jewish laws. So they would be fighting with each other over that. The Sicilian Jews they were not obligated to live in ghettos. They did live in communities near the synagogue, and their community, the Jewish community in Sicily, is called Lacada. The Jewish community all over Italy is known as a Giudecca, but in Sicilian they called it Lacada. I don't if any of you know Latin or Italian, there's this double L sound, and in Sicilian, that double L is pronounced like a D, a double D. So Lakada, which in Sicilian language, it comes from Hebrew kal or kahila. So that was their community. And in the 14th century, Frederick II, who came down from one of the Norman kings that came in, drove out the Muslims. What happened to the Muslims? They were driven out by the Normans, and they wound up going to the southeastern part of Sicily. So if you go to Puglia, and Italy is like a boot, so it's the heel of the boot and up. So if you go up there, you would find the Muslims went there, and eventually they all became Christian too. Okay, so it's good. So the Jews wore their own clothing. They wore taled or talis, because, and this comes from the book, because they would not admit they would not admit that with the coming of the real Messiah, Jesus Christ, our Redeemer, all ceremonial prescriptions were abolished. So they were made to wear their traditional clothing. So in 1492, the Ferdinand and Isabella wrote out this edict of expulsion, where all the Jews had to leave Spain. When that edict came to Sicily, there was a problem, because the governor of Sicily did not, he couldn't expel all the Jews right away, because they were the only ones who knew how to do the wrought iron industry. So they had to, teach the Christians how to make the arrows and the barrels and all that other stuff. And so they were given a 3-month extension before they had to leave. Emperor Frederick II did require Sicilian Jews and Muslims to dress differently from Christians. After his death, and Frederick was in the early 14th century. After his death, the Jews began to dress like Christians and speak Sicilian. That's when the Jews first started to actually speak Sicilian. He required that Jews wear special insignia, which was what they call a rotella rossa, which is a red wheel. It looked like a red wheel. And in 1364, that law, and he initiated a special office to oversee this, and named Fra Nicola Papalia as its custodian, who was a priest. Women had to wear this red wheel on their chest and on their veils, and men on their chest, a palm distant from the chin, so that it was to be seen by everybody. The Muslims had to wear a red bar, a palm's length and 2 fingers wide on their chest, as well as on their turbans. The Jews were forbidden to lodge in the same house, sit at the same table, sleep in the same bed, or have any familiarity with Christians, for fear that perfidious deceiving nation would ruin the simple Christians. That's from this book. The Jews had to pay special taxes, 2 special taxes. One was called the Agostale, which was due in August, and the Jizya. That was actually something that was left over from the Muslim. The Jews had to buy all the flags and banners used in the castles and on the ships. The Jews of Messina had to sweep and keep clean all the castles, fortresses, and royal palaces. The Jews of Syracuse had to pay for the royal dinners and wax candles of the palace. The Jews of Matsara, that's near where our family was, Matsara had to pay the bishop £5 or at least 2.5 pounds of pepper on Christmas, Easter, and the Feast of Corpus Christi. The Jews of Shaka, and I have a lot of family in Shaka as well, the Jews of Shaka had to keep guard of the city at night and had to pay for that privilege. So they were the guards, but they had to actually pay for being the guards. And the Jews of Palermo had to pay the Eugalia, which was a tax for every Jewish wedding and an additional tax for every newborn, more for boys, obviously. The Jews of Catania paid a tax for wine that was bought or sold. The Jews of Messina paid a tax called setina, a tax for meat and any salted food. They had to pay the archdiocese 1/4 of any inheritance, and no one except for 2 or 3 privileged families was accepted. Jews were obligated to go to church and observe the Christian holidays and to listen to sermons about the Catholic faith, especially on Christmas and the feast of Santo Stefano, that's St. Stephen's Day, which is the day after Christmas. Now, St. Stephen was a deacon, and he was stoned to death. That's how he died. He was stoned to death. He was considered the first Christian martyr. So on that day, it was customary for the Jews to return home from these sermons by being pelted with stones. And the Jews also had to abstain from work on all the festivals of Jesus and the Madonna. And now there's the community management. So since many of the Jewish communities abided by different regulations, King Martino in 1405 appointed a Judice Universale, which was a universal judge over the 55 Sicilian Jewish communities. So if you think about it, the population of Sicily was a million people. 10% of them were Jews. That's a lot of people. And also, some of the Jews from the Middle East that lived with the Arabs, they also had this custom of having more than one wife. You know, the Jews did as well. And those people were not counted in the census. So you had like a lot more people even than the census would admit. And there were, they did keep, the thing about the church was that they were able to keep really good records. So we know a lot about what happened to these Jewish people. There's another book called The Former Jews of This Kingdom by Nida Zeldis. And in this book, she really cataloged all of the names of these people, all these Jews that were expelled, and she figured out the names, from their Hebrew names to the Italian names that they took. She went through the household items of these people, and and the church was very, they were very meticulous about these new Christians. So they would go into their houses and they made sure that they had pictures of the Virgin Mary and Jesus. If they had rosary beads, if they had all of these Christian things, they had to have them. Otherwise they would be arrested. So who knows? There's a story of this one woman a Jewish woman, her name was Katerina, I forget her last name, but her husband came home with this picture of the Virgin Mary and hung it on their wall. And when the woman saw this picture, she threw an orange at it, and she ruined it. And so they actually arrested her for that, and this whole story was crazy. The one interesting thing about these Italian Jews and the converted Jews, the converted Jews were not ostracized by the Jews that did not convert. They were not looked upon as non-Jews anymore. They just They all just knew that they had to do that they don't really believe in the religion. And so one of the reasons why we recite the Kol Nidre prayer, not really a prayer, it's a statement, is so that on Yom Kippur, you would renounce all of the promises that you made to a foreign religion. That was the reason for it. And that was done in Sicily as well. So the first judge was a rabbi by the name of Giuseppe Appanazia. And the second rabbi was Mosè Bonavoglia. And the third rabbi was Giosuè Bonartini. The individual communities such as Palermo, Messina, Catania, Siracusa, Trapani, Noto, Mazzara, and Malta had leaders who worked with the universal judge, and these men were called proti, or first men, in the original Greek language of Sicily. Each proto had a committee of 12 people who were elected by the sages of the community. They governed the community three at a time for 3 months each, beginning in May or Sivan, following the Christian custom of electing a new government in May. But although not all communities had this custom. In addition to the proto, about 10 other magistrates that governed the affairs of the Jewish communities were called maiorenti or alyami. So as a parody of the Hebrew scriptures, the bishop and the proto appointed sommi sacerdoti, which means high priests, and from the Kohanim, of the village. And according to these accounts, in the community of Syracuse was a very important city because it was the capital of the Byzantine Empire for 300 years. Most people don't realize that. And we had a lot of Jews there, and it was because it was the seat of the government, they did kind of government things. And so they wanted to make fun of the Jewish traditions in the Bible. And so these high priests had to actually conduct animal sacrifices, and they were called Jewish high masses, in order to stress the superiority of Christianity over the primitive beliefs of Judaism. These communities, the rabbis were chosen from among the most studious and were given the titles of Rav, Hacham, and Maskil. The synagogues of the larger cities were built according to Jewish population, with the Saracen domination. The Arab domination of the south was called the Saracen domination, Muslims domination. The numbers of Jews increased. The Jews typically call the synagogue moskeya or meskita, or sometimes timsla, which is, moskeya means mosque. And meskita is also a word that the Muslims use for their community. So the Jews and the Muslims use the same word for their house of worship. In the town where we were talking about, where my grandparents came from, Sambuca. Sambuca was an Arabic name, and it meant it was the name of an emir. And the first house of worship in the town was a mosque, and so they changed that mosque eventually into a church after they banished all the Muslims from the town. Other names for synagogues were scuole, which means school, scuole, or yeshivot. Muslims and Jews sometimes use the same word for their places of worship. Although Jews were permitted to construct synagogues initially, with the advent of the Christian emperors, they were kept in check. And in the 14th century, prohibitions against building new synagogues or extensions on existing ones were in force. So if a church or monastery was planned in the vicinity of a synagogue or a Jewish cemetery, those places had to be moved. Even a cemetery, they had to dig up all the bodies and move them. You couldn't read the Talmud or the Torah or anything within the earshot of Christians, or the Quran for that matter, for the Muslims. Christian and Jewish burial practices were pretty much the same. There was the use of the reputatrici. These were women who were paid to wail at the coffin of the deceased. You might have seen movies where they had something like that. I think in Zorba the Greek, they had, when the Bouboulina would die, they had these Greeks that came in, and these women, and they were screaming, and they would pay these women to wail. They were all dressed in black. The Jews also did the same thing as well. Jews were not permitted any funeral ornamentation, and coffins could only be covered with a wooden board. Jews were allowed to lend money, but not to exist 10% interest. Christians were forbidden to lend money. However, since the church financially controlled all the Jewish community's income, their exorbitant levies of taxes on the Jewish communities, in reality, it amounted to ecclesiastical money laundering. So the Jews. The Christians couldn't charge interest to other Christians. So the Jews charged the Christians the interest, but because the Christians own the Jewish community, they put all these taxes on it, so they got all the money back. So it's like this mafia money laundering, old world style. So the culmination of the persecution came with the expulsion of the Jews from Sicily and southern Italy. The decree of banishment was dated March 11th, 1492, and was given by Ferdinand of Aragon, Isabella of Castilla. At the time, there were over 100,000 Jews living on the island of Sicily, 55 different communities. On June 9th, Jews were forbidden to depart the island secretly, sell their possessions, or conceal any property. On June 18th, the carrying of weapons was prohibited. Their values were appraised by the officials on behalf of the state, packed in boxes, and given into the care of wealthy Catholics. On August 13th came the order to be ready to depart. The following articles were allowed: 1 mattress, a dress, a blanket of wool or serge, a pair of used sheets, a few provisions, besides 3 taros as traveling money. They said taro was about 25 cents, or maybe 75 cents of traveling money. All other Jewish property was confiscated by the crown. After numerous appeals, the date of departure was postponed to December 18th, and later on, a payment of 5,000 gulden gold coins to January 12th, 1493, in order to give the Jews some time to teach their wrought iron techniques and other abilities to the Christians. The official expulsion date was December 31st, 1492, but this is for the Sicilian Jews, it was January 12th, 1493. So initially the Sicilian Jews went to the Kingdom of Naples, and then afterward Ferdinand took over Naples, and the Jews had to leave again. See, this was the idea. There were all these different emperors, and depending on who the emperor or the viceroy or whoever was in charge, some of them were okay with the Jews, others were not. So what would happen would be the Jews would be expelled, and they would leave, and then they would, if they had a change of regime, sometimes they would sneak back, because they had their families were Christian. They were Christian, but they were still their families. So they would come back, and so it was a lot more fluid than people actually realized. So the actual number of Jews who left Sicily cannot be determined. It is believed that 2/3 of the Jewish population did convert. As Sicily was an island, it was difficult for Jews to leave, especially Jews could not leave the island with any coins marked with the word Sicilia. These converted Jews were known as the neophytes or neophyte or new Christians, and the neophyte were not trusted by the old Christians and were only tolerated by them. They intermarried among themselves and secretly maintained Jewish practices and customs. So some of the names that they chose would be, for example, if they came from a city where there were a lot of Jewish people, or there was a Judaica, or they would be named for the city. So, for example, my grandmother's last name was Trapani. Trapani had the second largest Jewish community in Sicily. It had a big Judaica. Romano was really a Jewish name. You might think, wow, that's interesting. But Romano is interesting that it's a Jewish name. And I myself didn't realize how many Romanos there are, but Romano really actually was taken by people who were Latins. And so if the Jews came from Rome, sometimes they took the name Romano. I myself performed in my past, I performed 4 weddings of Jews with the name Romano, and none of them were Italian. Some of them were Egyptian, they came from different parts, but they weren't Italian. They always would laugh. They say, everyone thinks we're Italian because we have this last name, and we're not, so we have that. Vito, Vitale, that's Chaim. That would be Chaim in Vito means life, so Chaim. Sacerdote is another big Jewish name that means priest. So if you were Kohen, you would have the name Sacerdote. Sacco, it's like Sacco and Vanzetti. Sacco, that's a Jewish family. It's Isaac is Isacco. We have the name Abulafia. We have a lot of these different Jewish names as well. And all of those names that I mentioned I have relatives with all of those names. So they just continued on with that tradition, who knows? And the exile of the Jews to the mainland of Italy, which was kind of interesting because from Rome up north of Rome, those communities were protected by the Pope. So if the Jews went, who were exiled by the Spanish Jews by the Inquisition, they could go uptown, so to speak, and they could move into communities north of Rome. And so they did. So Rome had a Jewish community, and then they went up to like Ancona in the northern part of it. Ancona is a very popular Italian name. Pacifici is another name. Servi means slave, and a lot of Jews had that name as well. So you have Jews with those kind of names too, and now Christian. So sometimes you can't really tell the difference, between were you Jewish? We don't know. It's possible they weren't Jewish at all. Possible they were Jewish. They all have the same names. So so the exile of the Sicilian Jews to the mainland of Italy introduced Middle Eastern cuisine to the peninsula, such as use of eggplants, artichokes, chickpeas, capers, among other ingredients. If you've ever had caponata, that's a real Sicilian dish. It's kind of an eggplant appetizer. I had one of my neighbors was Ukrainian, and she used to make this thing called ikra, she called it Ukrainian caviar, but it was the same as the caponata, same thing, and it was meant to be eaten at room temperature. So a lot of these foods were made to be eaten at room temperature, so you didn't have to cook on Shabbat. It was forbidden to cook on Shabbat, so they would have this type of food. And actually, the Italians were very resistant to eggplant. They used to call it the Jews' food. They didn't want it. They thought it was poison. Of course, they thought that Jews were out to poison them all the time. So that was. Then the oldest mikvah that was ever discovered was found in the in Syracuse. Now, the mikvah was really the most important building in the Jewish community. The mikveh was more important than the synagogue, than anything. The mikveh was important. And why was it important? Because you needed the mikveh to do the ritual washing. You had to be, so when women had their period, they had to go to the mikveh. The men, if your pots, if you cooked like non-kosher food in your pot, they had a mikveh for that. You can, clean, purify your pots with that. And so the mikveh was really important. Now, the thing about the mikvot in Italy and in other places too was that they were underground because you needed the flowing water. If you wanted to convert somebody, they have to be converted in flowing water. So they had to find wells, like an underground well, and they would dig these holes, and then they would dig these rooms around the hole, so the women and the men too, because the men had to go to the mikvah before Shabbat as well. And you've heard very often, I'm sure, that one of the reasons why the Jews didn't get as sick during the Black Plague as the Christians was because the Jews had this custom of bathing every week, whereas the Christians bathed maybe once a year. You know what I mean? Who even wants to think of what that smelled like? But so the mikveh was really important. So they were going to build a hotel in Syracuse, and so they were digging, and they found this mikvah. So before the Inquisition, what the Jews did was they buried the mikvahs so that they wouldn't be profaned by the Christians. So they were just these underground wells. They just filled in these wells, and you would never know anything was there. And so every once in a while, if you're like near a former Jewish community, like a farmer would go and dig a well, and all of a sudden they'd find a mikvah. And they did this in Syracuse. They wanted to build this hotel, and they were digging for the foundation, and they found this mikvah in the city of Syracuse. And it dates from the Byzantine period, in the early sixth century, and it was an underground catacomb fed by a spring and had 5 immersion pools. 5. It was huge. The Jews of Syracuse managed to bury the entrance of the mikveh in order to avoid detection by the Spanish authorities and the Inquisition. So today, no large communities of Jews exist in Sicily. There do remain traces, however, important to Jewish history. The Sicilian government has recently established a museum to preserve the remnants of ancient synagogues, mikvot, and along with the history of the contributions of Sicilian Jews, and to provide a welcoming home to all the Jews of the world. Now, if you go to Palermo and you look at the Cathedral of Palermo, what you see are little stars of David all over this building. The Jews were employed, they wrote these, they were architects, they made these plans, they were all over the place. An interesting point is that in Sicily, the names and surnames of many medieval Jews and Christian converts are Anusim, Neophyte, after 1493 are known. We said that before. Some example of these names are Ferraro, Ferrante, Russo, Mandula, Loporto, Spatafora, Palterno, De Marino, Ancona, and these are all widespread. You have the name of Pirelli Tires. Do you know Pirelli Tires? That's a Jewish family. And if you remember Olivetti Typewriters, that was a Jewish family too. So the Italian Jews had Italian names. And I remember I was asked to do a wedding in Florence, and it was an interfaith wedding, and the wedding was with the Cardinal of Florence. I did a wedding with the Cardinal of Florence, and it was in a 13th century monastery. And the family of the groom was Iranian Jewish. And I said to him, why don't you get married in Italy? Because his bride was the daughter of a dignitary of Florence, like one of the governors, sub-governors of the city of Florence. And she said, so David, the groom said, you don't understand. My family won't come to this wedding if they don't have a rabbi there. He said, you have to come. So I said, okay. So he paid for me to go, and he paid for Michael to go. We were in Florence, and it was kind of interesting. So I meet the cardinal, and he looks at my name and he says to me, Tamburello, he says, Italian, are you an Italian rabbi? And I said to him, what are you kidding me? I said, you have the biggest synagogue in Italy in your city. I said, who do you think goes to that synagogue? Italian Jews. He said, oh, yeah. So, he was not very nice. But the interesting thing was when we had some time to go to the synagogue, and when I did go, and Michael had come with me, and we spoke to the guy that was the caretaker of the synagogue, and I mentioned my family name, and he said, "Oh yeah," he said, "I remember your family." He said, "Go to the cemetery. You can see their graves." So we went to the cemetery, but that was locked, so we couldn't get in there. So I mean, that's kind of my talk. I'll answer any questions you have, but Kathy has a couple of pictures that I would like to show you, so to give you a little bit of an idea what we're talking about. So whenever Kathy's ready, we can see these. They're about 4 or 5 pictures. Okay, so can we see this picture? All right. So when I went to visit the town where my grandfather was from, and I remember I told you my great uncle said your grandfather's family had to leave this town. It was a town called Bissaquino, which was maybe about 15 or 20 miles from Sambuca. And he said to me, your grandfather and his family came from this town, but they had to leave. So I said, can I see the town? Let's go. So we went to the town, and in the middle of the town was this little courtyard. It's called the Largo Santa Croce, which means the piazza of the Holy Cross. Why? Because that cross, and you see it's made out of wrought iron, that cross was erected to commemorate the expulsion of the Jews for that town. And you can see it's backwards, but you can see the word anno, and MC, whatever it happens to be. It means year of 1493. That was the year where they all had to leave that town. So I thought that was really kind of interesting. And that courtyard where this is, behind that courtyard is a church called the Church of the Rosary, or Virgin Mary of the Rosary, that was built over the synagogue that they had. And why the Rosary? Because the belief was that the Virgin Mary of the Rosary protected the Christians from the Jews and from the Muslims, so she's invoked with that. So I think we have the next picture. And that's Susan. She is our friend. She's not a Sicilian Jew. I mean, but there we go. Okay, so this is a picture of one of the wells of the mikveh. You can see it. It was pretty deep. And if you want to do the next picture. Okay. All right, so this is a bigger view of the mikvah. You see how big it is? You see, oh, that's the well, and you see all those little where you would go in and, you know, because they had to take off all their clothes, so they needed kind of a measure of decorum. So that's so you would walk all the way down in that well. That was huge. It's the biggest mikvah that they've ever found in Europe. Okay. See this, remember I told you that the Jews would be involved in, you know, in the erecting all the buildings and stuff. That, you see that Star of David, that Star of David was on the floor of the Church of San Cataldo in Palermo. Yeah, somebody said the mezuzah in the Madonna's foot. Yeah, that I read that book. And so the next picture is yeah, somebody mentioned the word Murano. Murano is not, that's not, word wasn't used. That meant pig. That was actually, okay, so this church, this is right in front of where that cross was. This is a picture of the church that was built over that synagogue, or Madonna del Rosario. All right. This is the original edict of expulsion of the Sicilian Jews. (1493). That's what it looked like. That's what screwed all of us up. Written in Spanish and Latin. I'm sorry, written in Latin. Okay, so here's a map of Sicily. Now, if you look at where you see Mazzara, okay, that this whole area was Arab, right? Shaka is in Arabic. See Shaka up there on the west coast, like that's, and then right up above Shaka, you see Sambuca. That's our town. And then if you look at okay, so Syracuse is on the more towards the east coast. See, Syracuse is from right there. Yeah, somebody's pointing it out. There's Syracuse. If you notice, there are some of the names are Spanish. You have a city called Barcelona. And Modica, that word Modica, that had a big Jewish community too. Bivona, which is where it's on the West Coast, Bivona had a real big Jewish community as well. And then you have, you know, and a lot of the names of these cities are originally Arabic names. Trapani, you see where Trapani is, all the way on the top there, on the West Coast. That had the second largest Jewish community. And then you had Palermo there. And one of the things that we used to, my grandmother used to make all the time was couscous. They call it couscous. It was couscous. And because we were like near Tunisia, see, so that's where, and they were you know, people who fished. And they were, and the couscous that we made, we only made it with fish. We didn't make it ever with meat. Peter said, what kind of numbers per community? It would depend. I would say there were 55. Well, I would say there were maybe 200 people in the community. It's hard to know because they didn't keep a track of everybody that was in the community. And what they're finding now is that all these Sicilians are doing this DNA testing, and including myself, and we're finding out all these connections now. So my DNA is a lot of it is Middle Eastern, but what you also find is that they're able to pinpoint exactly where your family is from in Sicily as well. So it's kind of an interesting thing. Now, okay, this here, does this look familiar to anybody? Okay, this is a bunch of palms that the people in the city of Librizi use this for Palm Sunday. But the interesting thing about the palms that they use on Palm Sunday, it is totally a lulav that we use for Sukkot. Exactly a lulav. So all the things that that the Orthodox Jews put in the lulav, they have in this Palm Sunday thing. And this town of Librizi had a lot of Jews in it as well. Yeah. There's a tradition that the great, I don't know how many greats, grandson of Noah was a seafarer. This is an Italian tradition. And he went up the coast of Italy, and he stopped at the very tip of the toe of the Italian boot. And that place, that city now is called Reggio Calabria. And the tradition that Noah's son, whose name was Ashkenaz, by the way, was so prevalent that they actually, one of the main streets of Reggio Calabria, now that's a really big city in Calabria, is called the Via Ashkenaz. And some historians and researchers believe that the migration from the Jews up into France and then eventually into Poland and Russia, you know, of course took 1,000 years to do that. But they believe that the origin of these people could possibly have been in southern Italy, you know, and the use of the word Ashkenaz makes me wonder about that, you know. And also the interesting thing too is that the Jews in Poland and Russia, you know, those Jewish communities, they really have, you know, a lot more physical characteristics of Mediterranean, like Sicilians or Greeks. You know, Jewish actors can interchange, with Italians or Greeks in movies, so much more than the Middle Eastern Jews too. So who knows? But that's our talk. So I'm going to ask Kathy to to moderate any questions that you might have, so that I can help answer them if I can. I'm not an expert on this, but I can as much as I could.
Okay, so if you can raise your hand either physically or using the raise hand button, or you can put your questions in the chat, I'll be happy to call on you. Peter?
Frank, thank you. Oh, I'm assuming with all this interaction over the centuries, there's always been a great tension of whether it's fear or whether, I don't know how much acceptance from time immemorial. And the church was always either trying to enforce, sometimes, I guess, be a little moderate, but there was always that tension. Am I correct in these centuries-old stories in history?
Well, yeah, because like we said before, originally the Jews, they needed the Jews to do all of this financial business,
Because they wouldn't want to touch it?
Because it was, and it's the same ideal with the Muslims. Like you couldn't charge Christians interest. A Christian couldn't charge another Christian interest. So they used the Jews as go-betweens. They were the bankers. The Jews were not allowed to own any property. So they cultivated other kind of things like banking and other kinds of skills. So what the church would do is, like, the church owned all of these Jewish communities, and they had the power to levy taxes on them, and so they that's what they did, and so that was a way for them to get money, and also I think too it was you kind of needed Jews, because Christianity didn't make any sense if you didn't have Jews.
By that nature, is this where the Rothschild found the void to become the banking empire?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, of course. I had a friend of mine who was an Episcopal priest, and he went to the Solomon Islands to convert people to, the natives to Christianity. And we had lunch. He came back and we had lunch, and he said, Frank, he said, how do you convert people to Christianity who never heard of a Jew? It didn't make, none of it made sense, and I say, well, yeah, so you kind of needed the Jews, I remember when I was in Prague, and I had gone to the ghetto there, and I kind of attached myself onto a tour, and the tour guide was saying that the Jewish community was pretty much kept intact there. And then the Nazis thought what they would do is they would kill all the Jews, but they still wanted to keep alive the memory of an extinct people. You need to, their Bibles wouldn't make sense if you didn't have Jews. Like, they had to explain all of these things. So who knows? Then you had the Nazis that they really actually wanted to eliminate all the Jews, so yeah. I think somebody else had a question.
Yes, Joe?
Hi there. Yes, thanks for taking my question. I found your talk very educational and interesting. I've just been doing some recent genealogy research, my own family history, and I've discovered that the original lineage dates back to Spain around the Spanish Inquisition. And from what I can gather, there were three brothers who fled to Italy. One brother went to the north, one went to the mid-south, I think maybe around Naples, and a third went to either Reggio or Sicily, I'm not sure. But my background is Italian, obviously. my immediate family is from Reggio. And I'm just wondering if you know if there were Sephardic Jews in Reggio, or were they just mainly in Sicily? Thank you for taking the question.
Okay. I don't know that. The thing about the Italians is that they're Sephardic only if they came from Spain. The Italian Jews, there were Jews in Rome has the oldest Jewish community, existing Jewish community. It's 4,000 years old. Okay. And the Italian Jews have their own R-I-T-E, ritual. They have an Italian ritual. They're called B'nai Roma, the house of Rome. And so they're not considered Ashkenazic or Sephardic. They're considered what they call Italkim. You have that there. And you have Ashkenazim as well. So if you were to go to Venice, you will find synagogues, old synagogues. One was for the Italian Italkim, one was for Sephardim, the other one was for the Ashkenazim, And so it's hard to know, but I would assume that there were Sephardic Jews in Sicily. Yes, there were, but the thing about the Jews, the Sephardic Jews, is that they did have connection with the Arabic Jews as well. And like I said before, they would go back and forth from Spain, and it would depend on who the emperor was, or who the ruler was. If they had a problem, they would go back. So they were more in connection. They were all Jews. They all understood the Hebrew or whatever it was, and so they were able to do that. But I'm not an expert on that. There are different. Different theses that are, but I don't really know that much. But thanks for that question.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thanks for the reply.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments for Rabbi Frank? Well, I thought it was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for giving it.
And thanks for everybody for hanging in there. I know everybody's tired after a whole week and stuff, and you did a great job. I commend you for that too. So Shabbat Shalom.
So now we will enter our informal schmooze portion of the evening for anyone who wants to stick around and have a nice conversation with everyone, or a discussion, a group discussion. You're more than welcome to.
This is Ellen, who hasn't been on before. Can I say something?
Of course.
I don't know if you can see me now, but anyway, I found out about this program from the president of my congregation in Orange County, California. And I want to say I really loved it. I really enjoyed it, both the service and the presentation. So I was wondering how I can get on the mailing list to hear about and possibly participate in more.
Oh, I'll be happy to put the link in the chat.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
No problem.
Yeah, I have an iPad. I'm going to move over and I'll copy it. Thanks.
Sure. Where in Orange County?
Well, I live in Huntington Beach, but the Orange County it's called the Pacific Community of Secular Humanist Jews. So it depends on where, but I live in Huntington Beach.
Okay, my dad used to work, my whole family moved out to Orange County. My dad used to work in Huntington Beach. Yeah, my sister lives in San Clemente, and we had so.
Well, Huntington Beach has become very conservative and awful. And while you were speaking, I was wondering if they were going to expel us. Because it's so terrible.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, years ago when I went to visit my parents, it was like Friday night, and I said to my dad, let's go to the synagogue. They had a synagogue there. I forget it was near Laguna Niguel, Leisure World. It was near Leisure World. So we go to this synagogue, and I was the youngest person in the synagogue. And so the rabbi would say, "Oh, who's from where? If you're not from here, raise your hand." So everybody would raise their hand. "Where are you from?" "Oh, I'm from Great Neck, or I'm from Manhattan, or I'm from Long Island, or Westchester." Everybody was from New York. I thought that was kind of funny. Okay.
Yeah. Call it transplants, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, to the woman from California,
Yeah.
we have a category of membership called Friends of the City Congregation.
Oh,
And you might inquire about that. It gives you, entry to lots of things.
oh, wow. Thanks.
Yes.
I must
Yes.
say it doesn't cost very much, and you could, feel that you're part of us.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I'll be out of commission for a little while because I'm having surgery, but I just hit the subscribe button.
Yeah.
So oops.
Ellen, are you okay in Huntington Beach? Are you experiencing the fire at all?
Not too bad. I was hiking up on a mesa kind of, and I could see the smoke in the sky.
Mhm.
I'm not too bad, but the next town over, my friend said there's a lot of soot on her patio.
What town is that?
Seal Beach. It's just a little north of me. So
My best friend's parents live in Huntington Beach.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
I've been there many times. And it's a lovely place.
It is, except it's just changing politically.
No, it is, but they're also liberal. They live across from Dick Van Dyke's wife's parents.
Oh, I wouldn't know where
You get
that.
Like Dick Van Dyke.
Yeah.
You know who that is?
Yeah,
he married a woman much younger, but they live across from her mother, who is like in her 70s. And they went to his wedding.
Oh, how nice. Good for them.
But
I think he's still alive. He's almost 100 years old.
No, he's still alive.
He just turned 99 in December.
Yeah.
But they live near Ruby's.
Ruby's the restaurant?
Yeah.
Oh, because that was on the pier and it's no longer.
Oh, why not?
Maybe there's another Ruby's that I don't know about.
Wait, what happened to the Ruby's on the pier?
I don't remember. There was one that burned, but I think that might have been Seal Beach Pier. But there's another restaurant there now.
No, I mean that's the one. That's the
Yeah.
one.
Well,
Oh
they
my
could
god.
cross from that because that's down the pier. You know what I mean? It's in the ocean. But if they live near the coast, there's a lot of nice areas by the coast. Yeah.
Anyway, I was there in like 2007. It was lovely.
Aw.
Hey, Frank, when you mentioned Romano, I kept on thinking of Ray Romano. And
So did I, Peter.
now here's the joke here. His manager used to be a friend of mine from high school, Roy Rosegarden. So maybe Ray Romano is 10% Jewish by his agent. It's an old joke based on something else.
I mean, he is funny, right?
Well, funny be that as it may, but Romano, I've never heard of that. That is a potential of having a Jewish background, and I wonder now if Ray Romano even explored that. And what's the possibility? 50%, 80%?
It could, it depends on actually where they come from too.
Mm-hmm.
I have a Siddur, a prayer book. It's all in Spanish and Hebrew. Okay, it's from Mexico, and the person the book is, how they always dedicate the prayer books to families that finance it. So the family that financed it was called Romano, and so who knows? They could have come over with. That family could have come over with Columbus. Columbus.
And Columbus story is a whole nother story.
Yeah, but there was a couple of Jews that came over with him, and I think that one of them was named Taurus, which is a Jewish name. So Spanish names that have es at the end, like they're considered to have they might have Jewish heritage. You don't know.
Hi, Shirley. How are you? It's nice to see you. Oh, you're muted. You have to unmute. You're still muted.
Okay.
Oh, there you are.
I'm fine, thanks. How are
Oh,
you?
it's so good to see you.
Good.
I love seeing you.
By
I
the
didn't
way,
get
I
to
saw
see.
you in the chat about Salomon Rossi. I love his music.
Yes,
He
yeah.
sang some of it in my chorus, and I just love it.
Yeah, I shared some of my favorite pieces. Did you get that?
No,
I
that was in
put
the
in
chat.
some YouTube links.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes, yes, I saw that.
yeah, I teach him every year in my Baroque music class.
By the way, I mean, how do I access the chat once the session is over?
You can. So
Oh.
if you want, I can send you the
Send them
links.
to me, yes.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, so one of the links I sent was my friend who runs a really good early music YouTube page. He's Israeli and he's like, I mean, he's just a really good early music person, but he also does a lot about Jewish early music, and one of them is Solomon Rossi. Yeah.
And one of the songs my chorus usually performs around Hanukkah is a Ma'oz Tzur version by Benedetto Marcello, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful too.
Yeah, yeah. Rabbi, did you know that Solomon Rossi actually influenced Monteverdi?
I did not know that. Now I do.
And when you mean influence, what does that mean, Samantha?
He copied
Ooh.
Solomon Rossi, like literally copied him. Yeah, like